Have you ever had an experience where you saw that God was more? What do you think of when you think of God? Don't think of what your parent, pastor, teacher, or friend might say. Think of what you really feel. You don't have to answer out loud, so be honest. What really comes to mind? What does your life show that you think? Most of us are satisfied with a small view of God. I want you to know God is more.
Have you ever prayed for good grades the night before a test? You get there and you're like, I didn't study enough for this. And you're like, God, if you just help me pass this test, or if you help me get a good grade, then I will pray and read my Bible every day. You finish the test, the next morning your alarm goes off and you're like, snooze. I think we all kind of see the flaw in this. When we're desperate, we love to turn to God. We think of him as a get-out-of-jail-free card or a lifeline. But in our everyday life, it's hard to view God the way that the psalmist views him. Listen to this. As a deer longs for streams of water, so I long for you, O God. Most of us don't live lives where we think we need Jesus every day. When I'm desperate, sure, I'm thirsty for God. But when I'm not desperate, so often, I'm just like, I can live my own life. I'm pretty good. But in order for us to get to the point where we're thirsty for God, we have to start by recognizing our need for God. Most of us live lives where we don't think we need God. The book of Daniel is about a few exiles who suffer through persecution, and all these different things come against them as they've been cast out of Israel. And you have to zoom out to see why they've been cast out. It's because Israel didn't think they needed God, kind of like you and me. Sometimes we don't think we need God. And God said, okay, I'm going to let you be. And they were taken out and they suffered and they were persecuted. In 2 Corinthians 1, Paul talks about suffering and says that it produces patient endurance in us. And then he goes on to say that sometimes God lets us suffer to the point where we can't handle it on our own because he knows that that's going to get us to truly turn to him, the only one who can endure it. And he's not being harsh there because he's the one who endured the cross for you and me. He died for our sins. And if you think in your life, think about people who have endured some hard suffering. They're not the people who say things like, well, God's got a purpose in everything, right? They're the people who care deeply for you, and they weep with you when you're sad, they love you when you're happy, and they're there for you. But those are the kind of people also who don't forget God and what he's done for them in the good circumstances either. Their faith didn't stop or start in the hard times. It was refined and grown. Think about Daniel. You're probably familiar with the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And the reason that Daniel gets cast into the lion's den is because he's praying. But I can tell you for a fact that he didn't start praying when he was worried about persecution. Listen to Daniel 6:10. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room, with its window open towards Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. Daniel recognized what we need to see. He wasn't just looking for God as a lifeline in the hard times. He actually had that relationship with God ongoing in the good and the bad. Daniel recognized what we needed to recognize, that God is always there for us and that we need to constantly be aware of our need for him and go to him. God is more than a lifeline. He's more than a get-out-of-jail-free card. God is someone who we need to be in relationship with and who we constantly need, whether or not we think it. So let's break out into groups and talk through what does it look like for us to live lives of dependency on God. As you break out into groups, I want you to ask these questions. Why does having a good relationship with God in good times help us when we have hard times? Read Daniel 3:16 through 18 and discuss why it's not an example of people calling out to God as a lifeline. And then lastly, talk about what are ways that you can build your relationship with God so that he's not just a lifeline or a get-out-of-jail-free card for you.